But Packers fans here, I mean, they've had the number 1 seed the last couple of years. It is Super Bowl or bust. Again, right? Super Bowl or bust in Green Bay. Are they good enough to win the Super Bowl?
Not unless, somebody like Romeo Doubs shows up and is completely different. Or
could they just win in a different way, though? Could they win with defense? Can they win with a different style?
No, I don't think they can. That's what I'm saying. I think that wide receiver group, unless it looks different, and by that I mean either Romeo Doubs shows up and is a different player than people thought he was, continues this thing throughout the season, or they snag like an Odell Beckham midway through the year and OBJ comes in and changes things late in the season. Like that, they need to do something that would transform that wide receiver group. If they don't, I just don't believe you can win a Super Bowl with that group right now.
The other guys
game is. This, I don't want to hear this like, oh, well, look at when Tom Brady won it with, whoever. Like right now, the year 2022, with the current group of NFL teams, I don't believe you can win a Super Bowl with this group as it looks on paper.
There's a lot of good NFL teams that are loaded at playmaker.
And the game has changed. It's different to when Tom Brady first got his way into the starting lineup, and it's a different game.
The other guys they're hoping that can step up, Sammy Watkins, maybe Amari Rodgers in year 2, Alan Lazard, of course, who Aaron Rodgers puts in the Hall of Fame, Randall Cobb, his buddy, Christian Watson. I don't think he's seen time in camp yet, so he's probably going to start from behind. But
look, they got your guy as well.
Who's my guy?
Samori Toure.
Yeah, Toure could be the guy. Look at that. Great depth there. So I think it's a weird thing to say because they lost. The Packers lost because their offense was terrible, basically. Special teams was terrible, but the offense was terrible. In a night game in Green Bay where they scored 10 points at home, and they had Davante Adams, and they had Aaron Rodgers, and they still were terrible. So you could say, well, they would need to have other things to win anyway, right? They had Davante Adams and they still had a bad offense. On the other hand, it's like, well, they got worse at receiver. How are they going to do better in that next situation? How are they going to do better the next time in the playoffs? And it doesn't look great on paper unless Doubs really, he doesn't have to be Davante Adams, but if he's a high-level rookie starter, that's huge for the Packers here.
Huge, absolutely. You have a fascinating case study in how much can Aaron Rodgers elevate the play of a group that doesn't look good versus how much does a group that's bad drag down Aaron Rodgers? Or
the Packers, like if Deontay Johnson was a third rounder and almost immediately it's like, okay, this guy can make an impact right away. But if Doubs is Deontay Johnson level, a guy that the Steelers are talking about right now, 3 years later, talking about paying him $20 million a year, like Doubs could be that guy. I don't know. Is he that good? But if he is right away, he's like a 90-catch guy for the Packers, right? Are we jumping too far ahead here in hype?
No, look, we don't know yet, right? There are guys that look great in training camp every year, and they don't carry it into the regular season. But the players that do immediately overperform their draft status, where you look at them and you say, okay, we just got that wrong. He's a better player. And Deontay Johnson is a great example. Those guys tend to look good immediately. Right? We don't stumble into them in week 3 and then it's like, oh, look, we found this guy here. It's like, no, that guy was lighting it up in training camp, lighting it up in preseason, lighting it up in the regular season. We just missed when it came to draft time. Doubs has one tick. It's just ticking boxes. He's ticked the first one, which is immediately he looks like a better player in training camp. Now, do we see that carry over as time goes? It's entirely possible. Like I said, I had this inkling all along that Doubs was a better player than that and was a really nice pickup for Green Bay, but now we need to see if that works. But the downside of this is the last time we saw Rodgers with a receiving group this bad on paper was the worst PFF grade of his career by a pretty healthy margin. And the 2 years either side of that were 90 grades.
Yeah, and here's the reality of it. If Davante Adams was still on this roster, we would say they need Romeo Doubs to be as good as the hype is in camp, because they need a complement to Davante Adams. And it takes pressure off Alan Lazard, and maybe Christian Watson, when he's healthy, can just run the Valdez-Scantling deep routes, right?
And look, you
need that even if Davante Adams was there.
The other thing here is, remember the last run of Tom Brady in New England, where that receiving core got so bad that it made the offensive line look worse as well. Green Bay's offensive line all of a sudden doesn't look as strong as it used to. And David Bakhtiari is still working his way back from injury, still not necessarily 100%. Elton Jenkins should be a good starter at right tackle. He's been a good starter pretty much everywhere, but in the interior trio is not particularly strong. So I wouldn't have any concerns really about the offensive line. If you had a great receiving core and Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, they'd figure it out and they'd be fine. They always have. But if that receiving core is as bad as it could be, that starts to push into the Patriots with Tom Brady, where all of a sudden we're asking, like, what the hell's happened to the offensive line, when the answer was the receiving core, counterintuitively, because that group was so bad that Brady had to hold the ball longer. Nobody was open. You're inviting more pressure. You're playing worse under pressure, which makes it look worse because there's still nobody open when you're holding onto the ball that long. All of that could happen this year for Green Bay if the receiving core doesn't look better than it looks on paper.
Well, you're hoping the question that we've posed this offseason, is this the best defense Aaron Rodgers has had since 2010 when they won the Super Bowl? They had a good defense. Is this the best one? They made it through all of last year without David Bakhtiari at left tackle, but probably more importantly, without Jair Alexander for a big chunk of time at cornerback. Now you have Jair. You got a career year out of Rasul Douglas. You got a solid year out of rookie Eric Stokes last year. That is a solid trio of corners. Darnell Savage, Adrian Amos. We talked about the Ravens way back earlier on the show. I mean, this is competing for one of the best secondaries, if not the best in the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, I asked this question a year ago with different players, but you kind of repeat it again, which is Rasul Douglas career year, Rashawn Gary career year, Devondre Campbell career year. What happens to those three players this year? Can they all back it up? Because those are important players, and if they don't, that changes things. Devondre Campbell in particular, like, that guy was an all-pro with no evidence prior to that he was even within his range of possible outcomes. He had like a pretty consistent range of like 55 grades every year in two different teams, and then shows up in Green Bay and he's an all-pro linebacker. Like, A, what the hell? And B, now you've re-signed him to 5-year, $50 million contract. Does that happen again, or do we go back to like old Devondre Campbell?
Fair question.
Rashawn Gary, I think, should be fine. Like, he looked phenomenal last season. He was getting better as the year wore on. I would be reasonably confident that Rashawn Gary is just that damn good right now, and he's an immediate like-for-like replacement, essentially, for Zadarius Smith, who was their number one pass rusher, albeit not last year when he was hurt. The Rasul Douglas thing, like, we know cornerback play is really volatile. Is he going to have anything like the year we just saw from him? Like, we put that down to, oh, he's in a better scheme now, it more suits his talents, and that's why he got all the interceptions. Yeah. Alternatively, that just happens sometimes. It's important for Green Bay to understand that a lot of their important players last year had career years, and anytime you're sort of projecting what the next year is going to look like, you generally expect regression from career years, right? Just by their nature. They're career years for a reason. They're outliers. You're not expecting somebody to just back up year after year after year of career seasons unless their name is Aaron Donald. So Green Bay is likely to have to contend with some regression from important players, but I like the idea that Eric Stokes can offset a lot of that. Getting Jair Alexander back will offset a lot of that. I think generally they have gotten better.